Hello everyone. Most types in Pokemon make a lot of sense. It's no mystery why Ceruledge is Fire Ghost or Kyurem is Ice Dragon. Other types are a bit less clear, but still mostly make sense, like Bellossom, which is Grass type, but it could definitely be, say, Grass Fairy, or Aggron, which is Steel and Rock, but I could also see Steel and Ground or just Mono Steel. But then there are Pokemon whose types just don't make sense at all, either a baffling exclusion of a very reasonable secondary type, or the typing is just confusing to begin with. These are the Pokemon that this video is about. I put out a YouTube poll asking which Pokemon should be a different type, and I picked the 5 Pokemon that I found most deserving of a type change. For each, I'll explain the argument for why its type should change, and then explain how this may change its role in the competitive scene. I'll be focusing mostly on singles, my area of expertise, but a lot of these type changes would be relevant in many formats. First up, we have Goodra. It's a mono dragon type, but it probably should be dragon water. In-game, Goodra is known for having an affinity for rain. Its Pokemon Scarlet Pokedex entry states, "It loves the rain." This mellow Pokemon can be seen walking around on the plains and in the mountains on rainy days. And this makes sense. Goodra is covered in slime, and biological mucus tends to be almost entirely water. And then there's its move pool. Goodra gets moves like Aqua Tail, Hydro Pump, Surf, Scald, and plenty of less powerful water moves like Water Gun as well. And add on to all of that, it gets the ability Hydration, which heals status at the end of the turn when Rain Dance is active. Other than Shelmet, Excelgor, and Smoochum, Goodra's evolution line are the only non-water types to get this ability. But there's even more. Goodra is a pseudo-legendary, and it's the only one that's mono-typed. Everything seems to be pushing this Pokemon to be water type, but for some reason it isn't. But okay, what if it was, or becomes water type in the future? How would this change Goodra? Well, let's first take a look at where it is now. Like all pseudo-legendaries, Goodra has a 600 base stat total, but it probably has the worst stat distribution of all pseudos. An unnecessarily high base 100 attack, which it doesn't heavily use, mediocre base 80 speed, and worst of all, a whopping 150 stat points are on special defense. This is the absolute last stat you want to throw a bunch of points into, and with an only decent 90 HP and quite poor 70 physical defense, they managed to still make Goodra feel not like a bulky Pokemon, despite so many of its stat points being used on bulk. 110 special attack is pretty good, but overall it's astounding how that 600 base stat total can be arranged to feel so much lower. Special bulk is really all it has going for it, and this doesn't mean much on a Pokemon with no recovery moves, and this is the second bit of bad news for Goodra. They did not give this Pokemon what it needed move pool wise. It has no way to recover other than Rest and Life Dew, both of which are horrible, and it has no way of setting up. No Combine, no Nasty Plot, no Dragon Dance. It does technically get Acid Armor and Body Press, but this isn't a very strong set. Fortunately, there is one area in which Goodra excels, which is coverage. It has Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Knockoff, Earthquake, Sludge Bomb, Power Whip, bunch of water moves, as I said. It really has it all. It even has the rare move Toxic, one of the few non-poison types to keep this move in Scarlet and Violet. But other than having every attack known to man, there isn't much going well for Goodra. Its abilities aren't terrible, but they're nothing amazing either. Sap Sipper is probably its best ability, getting an attack boost and taking no damage if hit by a grass move, but since Goodra already resists grass, this isn't a massive deal. Gooey is its second most used ability, which lowers the speed of Pokemon that make contact with it by 1 stage. Not a great ability with its poor physical defense. And lastly, there's Hydration, which heals status and rain. It's almost never used unless Goodra is on a rain team, where it can be paired with Rest for a full heal. It's in the never used tier, the worst placement of any pseudo-legendary. For those that aren't familiar, in competitive singles, Pokemon are sorted into tiers based on usage, with overused at the top, then underused, rarely used, never used, PU, and zero used. So Goodra is quite a ways down. Okay, but what if it was Dragon Water? What changes? Well, from a defensive point of view, it sheds its weakness to ice and becomes 4 times resistant to fire and water, also gaining a resistance to steel. The downside is that it loses its resistance to electric and grass, but this can be mitigated somewhat by Goodra's Sap Sipper. Offensively, this is strictly a buff. Adding another stab type is always great. On paper, this type change is definitely a step up, and it would undoubtedly make Goodra a better Pokemon. Adding the water type would also make water moves much more popular on it. Most sets would probably use Scald, since the 30% burn chance synergizes well with Goodra's superior special defense. Mostly physical attackers are switching in to deal with it. And Sap Sipper would likely become even more popular, since Goodra would no longer resist grass. Overall, definitely a step up for my favorite pseudo-legend, but it wouldn't fundamentally change what Goodra does or how it operates. It would do a lot of what it does now, click special attacks with lots of coverage, but it would do it a little better and with a little better defensive and offensive profile. The change Goodra truly needs is recovery or setup, not a type change. Still, it would be nice. I'd say it would probably have been rarely used this generation if it had a water type, maybe even underused. Alright, next up we've got a Pokemon that already is a water type, Golduck, but it's shocking that it's not water psychic. First of all, its pre-evolution Psyduck has tons of Pokedex entries detailing its psychic powers. For example, from Pokemon Yellow, always tormented by headaches, it uses psychic powers, but it is not known if it intends to do so. Golduck doesn't have nearly as many references to psychic powers as Psyduck, but it is still a part of its lore. The Pokemon X Pokedex entry states, it appears by waterways at dusk. It may use telekinetic powers if its forehead glows mysteriously. And both Psyduck and Golduck get a ton of psychic moves, like Psychic, Psychic Noise, Psyshock, Hypnosis, and Confusion. It's very clear that both of these Pokemon have psychic powers, and they're sitting here with the mono water typing. Why? I have no idea. I'd say it's a bit more absurd that Psyduck isn't a psychic type than Golduck, but I'll focus on Golduck since it actually has some competitive relevance and would be more fun to analyze. Before we discuss what could change, let's talk about Golduck as it is now. Its stats are pretty rough, and in a very narrow range. Its worst stat is base 78 defense, and its highest stat is base 95 special attack. 80 HP and 80 special defense gives it pretty mediocre bulk, and its 85 speed is, like all its other stats, mediocre. It also has a base 82 attack, but it really never uses this. It's strictly a special attacker. It's in the 0 use tier at less than 1% usage. Surprisingly though, Golduck is actually a higher performing Pokemon in the main format, Overused. The user UUTS hit rank 1 with a Golduck Rain team. The reason for using such an odd pick is that Golduck has the ability Swift Swim, which doubles its speed in rain, paired with a surprisingly amazing move pool. It gets Nasty Plot, making it a major threat under rain. Gets standard coverage you'd expect, Hydro Pump and Surf of course, and Ice Beam, along with the aforementioned coverage, and it also gets priority in the form of Vacuum Wave. So despite being in 0 used, Golduck is a Pokemon that demands respect in Overused. But what if it was Water Psychic? Well, the defensive profile gets way worse. It now resists Fighting and Psychic in exchange for gaining a weakness to Bug, Ghost, and Dark. Not great on the defensive side, but this really doesn't matter for Golduck. Unlike Goodra, nobody is using Golduck to take hits. What really matters is how this affects Golduck's offensive profile. Gaining Psychic Stab would make Psychic and Psyshock strong options, and in particular, I'm looking at Psyshock. In the Overused tier, Golduck struggles to get past Ogerpon Wellspring, Blissey, Water Absorb Clodsire, and special walls like Assault Vest Alomomola and Assault Vest Galarian Slowking. With a single Nasty Plot, Life Orb Psyshock can one-hit KO all of these Pokemon except Alomomola, which it kills with 2 Nasty Plots. Currently, a non-stab 80 base power move is just too weak to really justify using on Golduck, but if it had this stab, I think we'd see Psyshock on nearly every Golduck, and it would become a much more threatening Pokemon on rain teams. It would go from a very niche option to potentially one of the more powerful and respected Swift Swim Pokemon. Now, Golduck's viability would be tied to Rain's viability. If Rain as an archetype is good, then Golduck has a chance to be good. If not, Golduck is out of luck. But if Rain is particularly strong, with the right metagame conditions, I could even see Golduck making the legendary 0 used to Overused jump. Probably it wouldn't get enough usage for that to happen, but I at least expect the added Psychic type would be enough to make it a feared threat on Overused Rain teams. Now let's pivot to a Pokemon that won't be getting to Overused anytime soon, or probably ever, Electivire. This poor guy has been considered a major noob trap in pretty much every generation since it was introduced, but could its typing be the problem? Electivire is mono-electric, but many argue it should be electric fighting. Its lore presents it as a very aggressive and combative Pokemon. For example, its Ultra Sun entry states, it grips its tail, which spews electricity, and then beats down opponents with the power of its electrified fist. Its move pool also seems like that of a fighting type. It gets all the elemental punches, Ice Punch, Fire Punch, and of course Thunder Punch. It also gets fighting moves like Cross Chop, Hammer Arm, and Bulk Up, along with the more commonly distributed fighting moves like Blow Kick, Focus Punch, Brick Break, and more. But would the fighting type be enough to save Electivire? As always, let's look first at where it's at now. Its stats are pretty underwhelming. Electivire has a solid base 123 attack, but everything else is pretty mediocre. Base 95 speed is alright, 75 HP with 67 defense and 85 special defense makes it feel quite frail, and it has a 95 special attack that it almost never uses. Things to look up for Electivire on its move pool. As I said, it gets Ice Punch, a super high value move for electric type. It has the debatably strong Electric Stab Supercell Slam, along with pretty solid coverage like Earthquake and Knockoff. Sadly, Bulk Up is the best setup move it gets, though. No Swords Dance for Electivire. Its abilities don't help it out much. Vital Spirit to prevent sleep is okay, but rarely useful, particularly with the current sleep ban for singles. Motor Drive is definitely the stronger of its two abilities, giving it an electric immunity and a one-stage speed boost when hit by electric moves. This is also pretty bad though. To activate this, you have to switch Electivire in on a predicted electric attack, and if you get that prediction wrong, Electivire doesn't have the bulk to take a hit. It's in the lowest tier, 0 used, but at least it is viable in that tier. Typically, it uses Bulk Up and 3 attacks. But what if it was a fighting type? Defensively, I'd say this is a step up. Fighting is a pretty solid defensive type. It would gain a resistance to Bug, Rock, and most importantly, Dark. It would now be weak to Psychic and Fairy and lose its resistance to Flying, but I'd still call this a good deal. The much more important aspect here is offensive, though. Would this fighting stab be a big deal? Well, no. Despite Electivire having tons of fighting moves, its best physical fighting stab would be Cross Chop. It doesn't get close combat. This is pretty bad. Cross Chop is 100 base power, but 80 accuracy. A new stab also just doesn't address any of the issues Electivire has. Its poor bulk and mediocre speed is the big problem. It would definitely be a buff, but I can't see this change even taking Electivire out of 0 used. Without close combat, I'm not even convinced it would use fighting moves. But even if it was granted close combat, it just wouldn't help much. The stats are the real problem. I love Electivire and I hate to see it being so terrible, but the truth is, unless we see a Mega Stone in the future, Electivire will remain at the bottom. Before we move on to the next Pokemon, a quick word from today's sponsor. Are you looking for a breaker? Tired of losing to stall teams? Well, you definitely shouldn't use Hoopa Unbound. It can't break stall at all, particularly not with Choice Band sets. The sets are awful and never work. If you do insist on running a Choice Band set, you definitely shouldn't use Hyperspace Fury. Knockoff is more than enough as a Dark Stab. You'll want to use the other slots for coverage. But if you truly insist on using Hyperspace Fury and Knockoff, you definitely shouldn't put Terra Dark on it. Hoopa struggles defensively and really should make use of a defensive Terra type like Fairy or Steel or something. If you really want to destroy stall, the right breaker is Choice Specs Dragapult. This will get the job done. Don't worry about Blissey, you'll find a way past it. This segment was sponsored by Big Stall. If you've got the time, we've got the team. Alright, huge thank you to Big Stall for making videos like this possible, and now let's get right back into it. The next insanely typed Pokemon is Lycanroc-Midnight, which is a mono rock type. I truly have no idea why it isn't rock and dark. On top of being named Midnight, when it's almost always dark outside, its in-game lore gives this Pokemon a clearly dark personality. All of its Pokedex entries outline a vengeful and bloodthirsty nature, but to give one example from Pokemon Moon, it goads its enemies into attacking, withstands the hits, and in return delivers a headbutt, crushing their bones with its rocky mane. This is a pretty ironic entry given its defensive stats, which we'll discuss soon, but for now, the point is that it definitely has a dark side to it, and its move pool shows this as well. It gets 10 dark moves, notably Foul Play, Knockoff, and Lash Out, none of which the other Lycanroc forms get. The only reason I can see why this Pokemon isn't rock dark is that it seems like it was just decided that all Lycanroc forms should be mono rock. This really isn't reasonable though. All 3 forms could easily be given secondary typings, perhaps normal for Lycanroc Midday and fighting for Lycanroc Dusk. Anyway though, let's get into how Lycanroc-Midnight is doing now. Its stats are rough. 115 attack is okay, but everything else is pretty awful. 85 HP and 75 in both defenses isn't technically what I'd call frail, but when you consider mono rock being a terrible defensive type, it feels very frail. The real issue, though, is that base 82 speed. Not nearly fast enough for a Pokemon with such poor bulk and mediocre attack. While the other Lycanroc forms have 110 and 112 speed, the poor Midnight form is getting outsped by pretty much any offensive Pokemon. It does have a good move pool at least, priority with Sucker Punch, Close Combat, Swords Dance to set up, and of course Stone Edge as a stab. It also gets No Guard, an ability which prevents missing from happening altogether, whether the Pokemon is attacking or being attacked, so it can click 100% accurate Stone Edges. Great as this sounds, those stats are difficult to overcome. Lycanroc-Midnight is in, you guessed it, the 0 use tier, and it gets less than 1% usage. When it is seen, it's often holding a Choice Scarf to shore up that awful speed, and used to spam accurate Stone Edges. So things are looking bleak, but maybe the type change is what Lycanroc needs. Defensively, this doesn't really change much. I'd call it a slight step up, gaining a ton of new weaknesses, but also the valuable ghost resistance. What really matters, though, is the offensive side. A stab knockoff is an incredible thing, and most importantly of all, a stab sucker punch. Powerful priority would help Lycanroc-Midnight at least partially overcome that mediocre speed stat. Sadly, I don't see this helping much, or even getting Lycanroc out of 0 used. But it would probably change the set it runs. I expect Swords Dance Sucker Punch would probably overtake Choice Scarf as the most popular set, or at least see decent usage. But for anyone hoping that Lycanroc would shoot up several tiers, it sadly won't happen. Its base stat total is bad, and the stat distribution is worse. Now for the last Pokemon of the video, this is probably the most absurd one on this entire list. Florges is a mono fairy type, and I cannot for the life of me understand why it isn't fairy grass, or really even just grass. It literally is a flower. Its Pokedex entries are all related to its propensity to tend gardens. The Ultra Sun Pokedex entry even goes so far as to state, it controls the flowers it grows. The petal blizzards that Florges triggers are overwhelming in their beauty and power. It controls flowers. It triggers Petal Blizzard. It learns 13 grass moves. Yet, it is not a grass type. There are only 2 reasons I can see that justify Florges being mono fairy. The first is that fairy types were introduced in X and Y, and its first evolution Flabebe was a very early root Pokemon in X and Y, and the developers wanted to show off the fairy type early and let the player learn how the type works without worrying about a dual typing. This doesn't seem like a great reason to me, though. The second reason they might not have made it a grass type is one of its abilities, Flower Veil, but we'll get to this later. Florges has a respectable 552 base stat total, but it got the Goodra treatment where a massive chunk of that is thrown into special defense, 154 to be exact. This leaves it with poor physical bulk, 78 HP and 68 defense, a mediocre 75 speed as well. It does get 112 special attack though, not amazing, but definitely solid. Its move pool is extremely disappointing. While it does get solid fairy moves like Moonblast and Draining Kiss, as well as Wish and Synthesis for healing and Calm Mind for setup, its coverage is abysmal. It gets a ton of grass moves, stuff like Giga Drain, Energy Ball, and such, as well as a few normal and psychic moves, and that's about it. Its entire move pool loses to Steel. It has one single attack that isn't resisted by Steel, and that's Chilling Water. Its abilities don't help at all, both are nearly useless in competitive singles. Symbiosis causes Florges to give its item to its ally right after the ally uses their item. It's not a horrible ability, but never enough for Florges to see real usage in VGC. Flower Veil is similarly not helpful. It prevents stat drops and status from being inflicted on grass types on Florges' side of the field. These nearly useless abilities have left Florges in the PU tier, but it is at least a top tier in PU, often running Calm Mind setup sets. Now, what if we made it Grass Fairy instead of just Fairy? Well, defensively, it's arguable whether this is an improvement or not, but I'd say it is. Gaining a resistance to water, electric, ground, and grass seems worth becoming weak to fire, flying, ice, losing the bug resistance, and getting a 4x weakness to poison. Fire and poison weren't good matchups anyway, and bug isn't a very common offensive type. As long as you're not weak to bug and taking tons of damage from U-turn, resisting it isn't a huge deal. Offensively, this change would do very little for Florges. It could run Giga Drain more effectively now, but Grass Fairy coverage is pretty terrible offensively. Both types get shut down by Steel and Poison, which I'd say are the top 2 defensive types. But The big deal here is Flower Veil. This protects stat drops and status from being inflicted on Pokemon on Florges' side of the field, but this includes Florges. So it would be immune to all stat drops and all status if it became a Grass Fairy type, whether that status is direct or by some secondary effect. This is huge. Currently, you can only achieve this by using Terra Grass on Florges, which really isn't worth it. But if it started the game as a grass type and didn't have to burn that incredible resource, this would completely transform it. This ability would be on par with Garganacl's Purifying Salt. I estimate that this would bring Florges up to the underused tier and maybe even have a real role in overuse, depending on how well it counters metagame threats. In these higher power tiers, I don't expect we would see Florges run Calm Mind sets. It would be too easy to break through its poor physical defense. But I definitely could see it used as a special wall, status absorber, and a wish passer. A niche option perhaps, but probably a real one. Well, those are my top 5. Can you think of any Pokemon that deserve a type change even more than the ones on this list? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. It helps out a lot. This channel is mostly guides and competitive analysis videos like this, so if you're looking to improve your team building, battling, or just enjoy learning about the intricacies of competitive Pokemon, you may enjoy my other videos. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.